What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 5, right?
Five.
I already forgot. Of the Sensible Solutions coaching podcast. Trey Bruffy, Austin Stout, and with us, as always, as well as Jeff Sue, Eric Albert from First Call It Fitness. We're going to talk all things fat loss today. So, tips, tricks, things we've picked up over the years. All of us have been doing this for probably 10 plus years. So, we
Yeah.
all probably have some things that maybe some of us haven't talked about with one another. But first, before we get in that, how's everybody's last month or so been?
I guess I'll start. Pretty good. Not nothing crazy eventful in the personal life front, but business side of things doing well. Seeing a pretty big uptick in the month of May. After I was a little concerned with April because I had three people drop off, but then we had quite a few sign up and well made up for the drop off, so that's cool. And then I want to shout out Eric. Eric, has advanced in his threshold, his client thresholds in terms of our split.
Oh, yeah.
So Eric's making
Jeez.
more money now because he's bringing in more clients for the business.
Talking
So
about
I'm
the behind the
really,
scenes stuff. Jeez.
yeah. So I'm excited. I'm
Full
excited.
transparency.
I got it.
Yeah, full transparency. Yeah.
And then he also made a Facebook post or an Instagram post rather that got what, like 1,000 shares or something. Like,
Yeah, it's kind of got a lot of attention. Yeah, it's like 1,000 likes and I don't know, 700 shares or something.
yeah.
Awesome.
It's titled "Bodybuilding is Dumb," which is just like some stupid
So
thought that I had and I wrote it out, but a lot of people seem to be relating to
Pe-
it, so it's kind of
People
cool.
like that stuff, man.
Mm,
catchy, yeah. So Eric
Never
and
would have
I,
thought.
we have like a weekly meeting now because him and I, we're buddy buddy. He's obviously he's also a client, but we just kind of like shoot the shit over text. And now we have like a planned meeting every Monday at noon where we go over cases and what I'm doing, what he's doing. So it's a little more official. And I think that's gonna provide for great things to come. But yeah, overall things are good. So that's it from me.
Eric.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I share a lot of those things. We're in business together, so it's been a good month. It's been busy. It's been good. I went to the New York Pro this weekend. That was awesome. It was really cool to see those competitors in person, man. And we sprung for some good seats, so I was only a couple rows back for pre-judging. And Regan, if anyone follows along who's listening, Regan Grimes came in really shredded. Usually he's watery, bloated, soft, but he was lean and shredded, and it was weird. He almost looked small compared to those guys, but he was
You're
really
not a
lean.
Regan
So
fan, are you?
I his gym pics and his meat and his content and all the stuff, he looks crazy, right? Like a freak. And then every time he comes out on stage for most of his career, he doesn't bring the conditioning. He's just like he's watery and he's soft. And then this time he was shredded,
Hmm.
but he was small. So it's tough. He's dialing it in, but like I give him credit for actually coming in peeled. And he took fourth. Crizzo beat him. Your guy Crizzo. You like Crizzo.
Me?
Yeah, you were
I
saying
like
you were like,
Grizzly
look at this
because
freak.
he's such a freak on Instagram. Like his triceps and his biceps, everything just super
Yeah,
round in 3D, granite like.
yeah.
But then on stage, he looks like Frankensteinish. Like his body
His
parts don't
posing's
really.
really bad. His for a pro is
Yeah, the
like
lats and the wide
it's
waist, like
horrendous.
his arms don't
His
look.
arms are crooked and shit. He's
Well, he
like,
Yeah,
can't.
you know.
He cannot. Oh, people are like, well, he can't open his scapulas. I said, I don't think it's his scapulas. I think it's literally his shoulder mobility does not allow him to pull his
yeah,
elbows forward
Yeah, he's forward.
because his shit is
yeah.
so big, like in his upper back and
Mm.
his delts and arms. You're just like, oh my! If he had enough mobility to actually
And he,
open that up. Oh,
You can
now his
see in his
lats aren't
face
that good.
too when he hits he's like,
yeah,
Yeah.
it
like
hurts.
cranking. And next time, look at his physique. Next time you see a stage photo, I've never said this about any bodybuilder ever. His glutes are too small. It looks weird. It looks so weird. It's like he's got small little glutes.
Oh, wow.
So it's funny. But anyway, he took third, and who Nick won. Yeah, Nick took
Who was
third.
second?
Um,
Bonac?
Bonac. Yeah,
Yeah.
Bonac.
Bonac was second. with
Bonac
He
was
tore
second.
his
Man,
tricep
he's thick.
sometime.
He's dense. His posing was so good too. Oh man,
it,
he was like down on the floor doing like the leaning over on the one leg thing and like, man, it was
he hit
cool.
the
It was cool.
tricep tear well, except in his front double, you could obviously see it.
Did he tear his tricep?
Yeah, his tricep, his right, I think it's his right tricep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That was
Oh man, yeah, but it was
Yeah,
a good
well,
show.
you
It was
didn't
good.
even see it. You didn't even notice it, and you were
No,
there.
I didn't. I didn't notice. No, and he only took second because Nick is just so much bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
But yeah,
Trey.
Hmm.
What's up?
Nothing much. A lot of personal development the last month. That's
Oh, I'm
my
sure.
priority right now. Yeah. Yeah. Went away on a little trip with Valerie for our anniversary and her birthday last week in the
Great.
tree houses. It's definitely really fun.
Mohican?
Yeah, back there. Yeah,
I've
we
never
went.
been. I've never been to the tree houses, but they look cool.
Yeah, it's cool, man. So we went back there. We went back to the wedding venue. We got married. So it was nice to like no social media. No one could reach out to me. Um, it was much needed and it gave me a lot of time to like reflect. I'm someone that's like, work harder. You're tired, stop being a pussy. You just have to do more. And that's how I was raised, and that's a hard thing to break. But it's definitely allowed me to like reflect on things, reflect on life, reflect on my marriage and just me as a person. So that was a nice getaway. And then I have a men's trip, thinking like 3 weeks to Montana for some fly fishing, and that is can't come faster. Um, Definitely. I'll be the youngest guy. They're all like in their 60s, stuff like that. So I'm hoping get some mentoring from some men that have messed up a few times. That way I don't mess up and hopefully come back and apply that with coaching, but apply that just in life. So really this past month, it's just been a lot of reflection, a lot of working on things that need to be unpacked with counseling and stuff like that. And then I think the only other thing we did, we went to a conference that had Ed Milet speak. I don't know if any of y'all like Ed, but um, he's definitely probably the only podcast I listen to or follow. Um, it's just super motivating, man. It's just his whole thing was like you got one more thing to do, or you can do one more thing with your family. And so again, like this past month, it's just been maybe not as much growing business wise as I'd like, but I think this year, as frustrating as it's been at times, maybe it's a necessary thing for myself mentally, because the last 2 or so years I've driven my dick into the dirt and
Jeez.
paying for it.
I've never heard that saying.
That's
Yeah.
a really good one.
Yeah.
I like
So,
that.
so that's
Asking to the
that's
ground,
me.
thinking of the dirt.
Yeah. A lot of growth. Are still working on it. So
Good, man. Some self-care. That sounds good.
Yeah, it's different seasons in your life, man.
Yeah.
yes,
Awesome. What about you?
Yeah, I kind of have like pieces and parts of all of it. Jeff, same kind of deal. I think our lull was a month or two ago, 2 months ago,
Yeah.
and then it had picked back up. So experienced some of that. Everything's going pretty well there. Uh, we just have a lot going on outside of the business too. Orion is graduating, so there's that, and then there's also Michelle has a shop opening here in the next couple months.
Cool.
So that's going to be cool. So she is a connoisseur of all things vintage and retro, and she has a crazy good eye for that type of stuff. Like you could like walk in and see her stuff and you feel like you're back in your grandmother's house or something. And it's a really interesting, heartwarming type of vibe. So she pretty much has all the inventory I think she needs at this point. So it's just a matter of finishing up organizing stuff so she can open. And then always, always trying to figure out how to get a little bit better somewhere, whether it's personally or business. A lot of I think at some point, like you kind of know what to do business wise. There's just the level of personal development that helps keep you sane and organized and structured and like through those lulls, Jeff, right? We've done it before. It's not like those things haven't happened before, but there's a level of maturity there where even though it's not easy, you do know what will happen on the other side. You're like, I'm doing the right stuff, doing the right stuff, I'm doing the right stuff, keep continuing to do that. So that's always an interesting period, especially when I was talking to my therapist a while ago too. I was telling her, I said, why is it that sometimes, even now, even though it's like I pay all my bills, there's not really a concern about that, but there's still this kind of like mindset around when a client drops off or this and
Yeah.
that. She goes, well, in all fairness, the way you have to think about it, on one hand, is when you were broke, you didn't really have anything to lose because you were already broke. So you were kind of living in that state perpetually.
Mm.
Or maybe you weren't because you never had experienced success. So you didn't really know any different.
Mhm.
So now, now it's like when you make that first 10K or that first 20, and then you're like continuing to, or whatever it is, it's like when you have a dip, you perceive those lower numbers a lot differently. It's like, man, this actually isn't bad. You look at the annual average income in the US and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
we're all right.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that new
The
high
bar.
becomes your low.
Yeah.
That ceiling becomes your floor, you know.
And so it's interesting because I think there's a lot of that can be applied to physique. Like, for example, you do your first contest and you get really lean for the first time, and your perception of what lean and good is will be changed for the rest of your life. You will
Yes.
never perceive those things the same ever
Right.
again.
Correct.
That's it, right? It's
That's a good
probably,
comparison.
I would compare it to, I would imagine it's very similar to somebody that's gets like addicted to drugs. It's like the
Yeah.
first high,
Dopamine.
right? The big one, or
And
strong, we're talking like really powerful recreational drugs. Like, well,
yeah,
then what, right? You chase, you chase, you chase.
yeah.
Which probably is a good segue into fat loss, I suppose.
Yeah.
No, it really is. Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. You brought up so many good points. Good conversation Jeff and I had recently was taking this sort of crazy mindset that we have about bodybuilding, but applying it to other things in your life.
Yeah.
You know, because like I'll speak for myself, right? For some reason, I can be super exhausted and still go to the gym or get my meals in or do this or do that. It's like, why can't I do that with posting? Why can't I do that with anything,
Yeah.
any task? You know what I mean? And it's sort of, I don't know why it took so long to click, but I was like, oh, that's how life works, huh? You
It's
just gotta like go
inconvenient.
do the thing,
Yeah.
if you want the results, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
The
anyway, so fat loss, yeah.
yeah, the I think the interesting part of that is the two different camps. So the two different camps that you're going to experience with fat loss clients. One is the ones who have been overweight the majority of their life,
Mm.
right? Maybe they've had some yo-yoing throughout that, but historically they've just kind of been overweight most of their life. Or you have the crowd where if you work with the ex competitor or the competitor that's run into XYZ issue and has regained weight, or, you know, age, life, as you get older, um, hormonal issues, all these things that have come into play. So you get a lot different mindset and probably a different approach potentially for the people that have never, been lean, quote unquote, and for the people that have been lean before and are now overweight. You have a lot different. I noticed there's a different mindset towards that. At least in my experience, some of the ones that have been historically overweight, other than periods of time where they've gone up and down, have, I don't want to make an absolute statement and say that they're more patient, but I do think that their perception to what good is or what success is probably different. If they were a female that's 5'5" and weighs 200 pounds, 170 pounds is like life changing.
Right.
Right? Absolutely life changing. If they're 5'5" and they were 120 before and now they're 170, that feels a lot different,
Hmm.
Yeah.
So why, it's like, how do you, so I think that those people from a mindset perspective are a lot different. And one of them's, but they could be equally as difficult to lose weight with, I would say.
Mm. I think with the people who have traditionally been overweight their whole lives, the initial coaching strategy sort of focuses on building consistency and confidence. Because for those people, any sort of calorie deficit is going to do the job. But, and this is again, it's just my opinion, but then, the advanced people, I feel like it's, finding a strategy that can help them maintain speed because they're going to want to get it done fast. They want to get it done quick and efficiently. They've got a target date. They know how to manage timelines and all that, but life happens, health things happen. So whatever strategy you pick, it has to allow them to maintain consistent speed and momentum to get them there. Otherwise, they will be dissatisfied or switch to a different coach or something, I think.
Yeah. Do you guys, I don't know how, I know Jeff, you probably have a mixture, and Eric, I would assume the same. And Trey, well, Trey, you do too as well, because a lot of these functional health clients have come from a background of, right?
Yeah.
Like they've come from a background of probably at some point being in decent shape, some of them at least.
Some of them, and then I have some people that were like if you use like MJ, like the guy that's competing in a few weeks, like he was force fed and he was not allowed to be under a certain weight. So he was having to be a fat boy or big, I don't want to say that, a bigger guy because he was a defensive end in college. And so it was a bit different. He had never been lean or anything like that. But I also get some of these like morbidly obese clients that have never done anything. It sounds like a lot of us have a mixture of all of it. I'm sure at least a handful of us have people that have been overweight their whole life, never touched a weight, didn't even know there's a difference between, I don't know, the random little cheese slices and grass-fed cheese. They probably haven't thought about that. They probably don't know anything like that or know anything about food in general.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, and I've found like, at least my opinion, I find I always do better with the people that have no experience, that have never
Oh,
been
just
lean.
starting from scratch is a little easier for you.
Because they don't have any like set objective or like they're happy with anything. Like
Hmm.
if they lose a pound and they haven't lost that ever, or they've been consistent on a diet, um, or I have guys that are happy just maintaining 275 pounds because they're not 385 or 400 anymore. For us, it's like, oh, why would you be happy about that? But these guys or these
Dude,
people or gals are just
that's
stoked.
a thought. That's a thought I've been having a lot lately is like I'll see somebody and see their progress and see what they look like and be like, oh man, we're so far away, and they'll be just so happy. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I have to change this and be happy too
Yeah.
because they're stoked. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it
Like,
kind of goes back with like the last episode with expectations. It's something that I have to continue to do is understand my expectations are vastly different than theirs. And when I'm celebrating wins for these people, for other people, it might not seem like that big a deal to like a competitor. They're like, oh, wow, he doesn't have a 50-inch waist, big
mm,
effing deal. Like, it's
mm,
like, listen, like that's life changing for some people. So
mhm,
I've always found I do better with that population
mm,
Yeah.
because they're just happy for everything. They are truly enjoying the process and they're not wanting to rush to other stuff like that. I mean, it's been a little bit different with the GLP stuff going on now. Like, it makes it
mm,
a little bit harder to counteract that. But I found with anyone that's been previously lean, they're almost harder because they're like, oh, like, how am I ever going to get there again? How have I let myself go? Like, all the like you remember that time we got that lean and I had to do this and that? Like, I don't know if I can do that, or why is it
yeah,
not working this time? You've got a lot more to navigate and explain to them than like someone that you just tell them, hey, instead of having McDonald's 3 times a day, I just want you to have it 2 times,
yeah,
1 time a week.
The-
Like, you know what I mean? So it's vastly
yeah.
different. Their expectations are different, their goalpost is different,
Mm,
and they're just, I feel like a little bit more open to things. Whereas I know at least when I was a competitor, I was a terrible client because I'll give you an example. Austin's worked with me a million times at this point. We firmly always disagreed on drugs. I want to do more. He wanted to do less.
yeah.
Um, I wanted to diet a certain way. He wanted to diet a different way. I like to train a different way. And guess what? Every time it dug a hole. And I'm sure for Austin, when I reflect, I
Would you
mean,
would you do it anyway, Trey? You would do
yeah,
whatever you
yeah.
wanted to do? Yeah.
100%. That's what led to
Okay.
all the health issues is just doing stupid stuff and
Okay,
maybe
okay.
some other poor coaching decisions and stuff like that. But reflecting on that, I'm sure Austin, there's numerous times he probably wanted to bang his head on the wall and be like, why is this kid not getting this? Like, I'm trying to prevent him from not doing this. I know this has worked for him, but I'm trying to show him a safer, better longevity way. And
Yeah.
we saw the result. I'm a buck 75 and don't do shit anymore because of my poor decisions.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's just what I've seen, both personally with clients, but also I can reflect when I was a client that I had my way that worked, type of thing.
Mhm.
Do you guys, the one that I get, and then I think I have a question that we can prompt with.
Yeah.
The one that I'll get a lot is from those types of people are, I did this before and it worked. And my argument is always, no, it didn't work, because that's why you're in the position that you're in right now.
Mm.
Yeah.
It actually did not work.
Yep.
If it worked, you would still be there, or you would, XYZ wouldn't have happened. You wouldn't have got burnt out. You wouldn't have ran into all these problems. Like, so my counter argument is, I disagree. It worked.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked temporarily, I guess, for the purpose, but
It worked for like the shiny object they wanted.
yeah, for a
That
minute.
split second.
So a good kind of prompt that we can work off of would be, if we're intaking those two different types of clients, what are what would be some initial things that we need to start with? Because I know now people are like, feed up your client, feed up your client, feed up
Yeah.
your client. Like, that's the start for everyone all the time.
Yeah.
I used to be really about that. I used to do that with everybody. And it's funny because I've been doing it less, but I've been getting better results. And I hadn't really thought about it honestly until right this second. That's kind of interesting.
Mm.
I guess unless their training is really, really stalling, will I add more food? But for most people that are weight loss,
Mm.
it kind of starts at baseline and it hangs there for a while and it kind of comes down. And that's kind of been the process. Yeah. Do you guys feed up at all in the beginning?
I used to, because, just the types of clients I was getting, they were mostly women that had been, dieting on, 800 calories a day and doing it
Oh,
in
that's a
cardio or
different.
whatever.
That's a totally. Yeah, of course you got
But
that.
even with them, like now, I just start everyone off with just like, I just see if they can be consistent with their meals,
Hmm.
because like if you think about it, like if you're gonna feed somebody up, they need to be able to follow some sort of a plan, some sort of a structure that you can ladder upwards, right?
Yeah,
Whether it's
because like if
tracking
they're
macros.
cheating, the cheats are almost refeeds, you know.
Yeah. So I just, start people off with like, can you eat this breakfast every day? And that's what I've been doing. And then they eventually work up to 3 meals a day plus 2 snacks or a shake. And then I take them further from there. But that's my starting point now and getting them to train properly.
Yeah,
That's a big
some
one.
some people, of course, like if they're coming from the background that Jeff mentioned, chronic undereating, yeah, those people, you maintenance is kind of a moving target, right? Like, we know that there's an adaptation that happens where maintenance could be a window,
Yeah.
but um but generally with that, there's other things kind of going on there. These cases where you do start feeding someone up and you see their weight dropping, it's probably to an extent metabolic thyroid hormone conversion, but there's also a large inflammation reduction that's happening there. So like a lot of that you're seeing is like the glucocorticoid regulation, like their cortisol is regulating, their inflammation levels are going down. So it's like, yes, you're seeing them lose weight and they may be losing some body fat, but that number that you're seeing isn't 100% body fat,
Mm,
right? Fluid inflammation, like all those things are dropping off because they're just getting healthier, right? They're functioning better.
Yeah.
So I think in an ideal world, you want to start someone at probably as high as level as you can within
Right.
reason. I think where we're running into issues is that, especially because I'm getting, you get a lot of these like digestive cases, is people feed them up and feed them up and feed them up, and then they're recreating or even causing issues that weren't there before, because they're like, I got my client Susie up to 2,300 calories. I'm like, well, Susie only really needed 1,900, and you
yeah.
actually gave her you actually exacerbated her gut issues even worse, because you're just trying to continuously feed her just for the sake of achieving some number,
Yeah. Well, okay, so you're
so
making me think of, yeah, a female client I had where she specifically said that she wanted to eat more. But that was like her goal. So every week we went by, well, are you hungry? Are you bloating? and how's your performance in the gym? You know, if those things lined up, yeah, I was full the last 2 weeks. I'm hungry now. Everything's digesting well. I didn't really progress in the gym too much. Like, okay, little food bump, you know, so like making sure it's being utilized, right? Not just forcing, unless, you know, maybe a bodybuilder needs to force, but regular people don't need to ever force.
Yeah.
But that seemed to
Yeah.
work well.
Yeah. Do we want to maybe list out a couple of strategies that we like to use, and then we can maybe like pick one and we can like dive deeper so that people have like four applicable takeaways that they can try?
That's cool.
For,
Yeah. What do you,
Yeah.
for
what
fat
would be
loss in
cool?
general or
Fat
for
loss in general, yeah. Like what are like I don't know, we'll start with you, Austin. Like what are like your top three, just like if you were to quickly describe three strategies that you use.
okay. One is, and to put it in a context, this isn't going to be everyone, but I get a lot of people that used to be competitors,
Mhm.
or maybe they still are, but they're in this part of their life cycle where they have all these issues to fix, right? So what I'm having to do a lot of the time with these folks is they come from a background of a lot of calorie cycling approaches, which I like. However, I noticed that they generally do better, especially the higher stress individuals that have issues with going off their plan or a lot of blood sugar dysregulation, um, of actually keeping them on a slightly more static plan a lot of the time. Now, that's not this, and if we're doing any cycling, that's not like drastic undulations. And furthermore, using a more even spread where we're having protein, carbs, fat, fiber pretty much in every meal with a meal frequency that works for them. Maybe that's four-ish if they're a female. They're probably not having to eat a ton of food. Could be five, maybe with some individuals. And that definitely seems to keep hunger more regulated. And not in a bad way, not like, hey, I'm stuffed, but I'm ready for my meals. They're having less issues with mood up and down, right? We're seeing more stable blood sugars. So that type of thing, more stable sleep patterns, so on and so forth. So that's at least with the types of people that I'm getting pretty often, that tends to work relatively well. Um, the other one is the other one kind of goes on the maybe on a I don't want to say it's not the opposite, but from a food selection standpoint is a big one because I'll also have issues with lack of hunger. And I'm like, well, we're seeing lack of hunger despite there not really being digestive issues. I'm like, man, we're only eating 1,500 calories. I feel like based on everything else I'm seeing, we should be able to eat a little bit more before we start pulling down. So almost keeping their plan, adding like a high antioxidant load into their plan, higher fruit intake into their plan, really gets the gut moving, gets the liver moving,
Yes.
and that starts picking up that hunger. So usually when we can do that, so like if we came in and gave them that type of setup from the front end, and I even will honestly sometimes I'll even include like fruit juices in the plan at the beginning if their hunger is completely trash.
Mm.
And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I can't eat these sugars because of my gut. 9 times out of 10, if we have the high antioxidant load in there and we have the fiber, as long as we're not going too heavy on the veggie portion of it, they actually do better most of the time. Now, we have to kind of watch like, okay, we can't eat this food, fine. We can't eat this food, fine. But as a whole, they aren't doing well on beef and rice and whatever vegetable you want to insert in there. It's like we need high fruit intake, even some shakes in there potentially for some of them, and then we can kind of phase them into more traditional foods potentially later. But I really want to get that hunger. I really want them to be hungry. Like I want them to be at the beginning. I want to get that moving so their body's ready to receive food over and over and over and over. And then that really gets the gears turning.
Yep. I agree. So those would be your top two, you would say?
Yeah, so those are probably two pretty common ones,
Okay.
I suppose.
All right. Eric, do you want to go next? And then I'll go, and then Trey will go like clockwise?
Yeah, I mean, those are big ones right there that Austin just mentioned. Um, let's see if we want to go off diet, obviously diet is the most important. You can't outwork a bad diet. I think we all know that. And but for some reason fasted cardio really does seem to be super effective. And it's always funny because I tell people all the time there's really no studies that show that it's more effective, but anecdotally we all do it and we all know that it works. So getting someone to move in the morning, walk first thing in the morning before breakfast, that often gets things moving in the right direction. Um, and it's funny, Austin, that you said, "Oh, more of a static diet," because when Jeff posed the question, I thought carb cycling. That was one of the top things that popped into my head.
Yeah.
So, I cycle
Sometimes,
carbs with
right?
people, a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah. So let's assume that they're not high stress, worried about things they can follow it. Definitely cycling carbs is a powerful tool, especially if they're more advanced, say a bodybuilder, picking a certain amount of carbs for a certain training day, higher on the leg days, the back days, lower on the arm days, the chest days. That works really well. Um, those are two right there. Pretty good that I like to use.
All right. I will, kind of expand upon Austin's preference for using fruit. That is something that I do quite often. And shameless plug for my newsletter. I will be releasing the next issue will be about improving insulin sensitivity by using fruit. But anyways, like Austin said, it's good for the liver. There's a lot of, nutrient density. I prefer using berries, specifically blueberries and blackberries, kiwi, and cantaloupe. Those are my four go-to fruits. So I'm not talking about bananas and pineapple, maybe some pineapple for digestion, but I'm mainly talking about kiwi, cantaloupe, and berries for their fiber, antioxidant content, and ability to help the bowels, right? And so one thing that people don't understand or may misunderstand about fruit is that they think, oh, fruit, sugar, blah, blah, blah. But those fruits I just listed actually have a lower GI than brown rice and oatmeal and sweet potatoes. So your oats and potatoes and brown rice have a glycemic index of around maybe like 60-ish, but these fruits come in at like 40 and below. And so if you take into account glycemic load as well, the quantity of these foods that you're eating, these fruits are also very filling because of their fiber content. So if you compare, 50 grams of carbs coming from kiwi and cantaloupe compared to 50 grams of carbs coming from rice, you're going to feel fuller on the fruit than the rice. And so I use fruit to, so what I like to do is I will, for carbohydrate intake, I will take someone's lean body mass and I will chop it in thirds. So let's say someone's lean body mass is 150, a third of that is 50, right? So I'll allot 50 grams to regular sources of carbs like complex carbs, your oats, your rice cakes, your traditional foods like that. But 100 grams comes from fruit. And I have found a really good result off of this ratio, like a 1/3 normal and then 2/3 fruit. And then eventually it becomes like 50-50 or like it swaps the other way around as I'm feeding up or as I'm dieting. And I've used this strategy to improve insulin sensitivity to hook onto fat loss physiologically by keeping carbs in the diet. Okay. So now another strategy that I use, and I'll just name these two because these are like kind of like weird and maybe unique because I don't know. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this stuff. But another thing that I'll do is I will start someone off with let's take that same 150-pound lean mass person, right? Their macros might start off at like 150 protein, 50 carb, 120 fat, and I will maintain them at a higher calorie intake with a fat bias and slowly swap fats into carbs. So I'll drop fats by 10 grams, increase carbs by 20 grams, drop fats again by 10, carbs by 20, until it's more of a traditional balance of macros. And I found really good results from doing that alone. Sometimes when people get fatigued from dieting, I will do a simple swap between fats and carbs, keeping energy intake the same, and I get continued results just from a macro swap. So those are two things I do.
Hmm. Y'all already used all the shit I do.
What about Trey though? What about the what about the low days though? What about like
Oh
using
yeah,
yeah,
okay.
because that's definitely I mean, that's definitely one that I was gonna say it, but I know that
Yeah.
you do
I mean,
like
because I
that.
do a mix of like what all y'all are saying. Um, I follow more nutrient timing. Like I know everybody says it doesn't work, but I swear to you it does. And I fluctuate macros. I might keep calories the same, but I do intentionally drop carbs on non-training days and bump up fats on non-training days. Like I firmly do believe in that. I know everybody says it doesn't work, or maybe it's out. It used to be a
People
fad
say
back.
that doesn't work. I do that with people all the
Dude,
time. It totally
I
works.
always get I always get crap from like coaches I work with. Like, oh, you got to have carbs all the time, blah blah blah. It's like,
What?
yeah, it just works too well.
Yeah.
And that's just something I'm a firm believer in. And then I'm kind of like Jeff and Austin. I flood the diet with fruits. I mean, most of my people are doing 200 to 300 grams of fruit per meal. Like I probably overdo it, and then we just put a little bit of carbs pre, intra, post if they're doing an intra. And then I like to just pull all carbs and just leave fruit on non-train days. And then um, the protein veggie day stuff, I mean, like I know Jeff uses it, I know Austin uses it, I'm sure Eric
Yep.
does. I mean,
Oh
I've
yeah.
been doing that stuff since I think my first prep when I was like 20, so like 10 years ago. And it's just a good way to get in and out one day
Yeah.
and just go on your way. I know Jeff's a big believer on it. I know like me and Austin, we use it pretty often at times and talk about it in like the mentorship.
I
But I
didn't
think
have to
that's
do
another
one this prep. Not a single one.
Did you?
Let's
Did
go.
we avoid
We
that?
we didn't do it. No. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I remember sorry Trey to interrupt you, but I remember we had a good week, right? We had dropped like a few pounds. We're right on track. I don't know how far out we were. Pretty far out, 8 weeks something. And Jeff, you were like, nice, dude. All right, come on, let's do a protein veggie day tomorrow. And I was like, why? Why, dude?
Get
And you
you
were like,
ready.
okay, yeah, I guess we don't have to. And I was like, yeah, all right.
Well,
That's funny.
it's one of those things like I found it just works well. It's mentally easier for someone to have 1 or 2 hard days than to have 7 somewhat hard days. So that's another one. Another one I'll use sometimes. It's been a bit since I've used it, but I would do excessive high protein days. Like I mean excessive, and I wouldn't set a limit on it. And I can't remember the study that was referenced. I can't remember the guy that. Austin, you'd probably
Protein over
remember.
protein overfeeding.
Yeah, you'd probably. I can't remember the guy that was in some of the bodybuilding groups at one point. He was
I've
a
never heard of
diabetic,
that.
but
What's that?
like
What's that one? That
so the
concept.
way I always did it is I would tell everybody these are the proteins you should stick with. And it was either egg whites, chicken, turkey, whitefish. And I would not set a limit. I would just say have 4 or 5 meals and you eat as much as you think you should. And it's worked. And I'll have to see if I can dig up the study.
That's
And
really interesting. I've never heard of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't remember the guy that I'm sure if I could think of his name, Austin, you remember him.
Yeah, it
But
was
he
like
used to be in the
thermic,
bodybuilding groups
yeah, all
and
the thermic effects.
yeah, it just works. Like it's been a while since I've done it, but that used to be a technique I would do instead of just protein veggie days. I keep the calories the same and I would jack the protein up. And there's some guys I had that were like 160 pounds eating 12 ounces of fish and stuff. It's way more than they need, but they would always drop. And it worked so well. They were
But there's
satiated.
essentially no fat or carbs, right? It's like very trace
No, I
fats
mean,
with
some of it would
tons of
convert
protein.
to like
Yeah,
carbs or whatever,
Mm,
glucogenesis or whatever
mm.
you term you want to use. But like in my opinion, your body has to work so hard to break that down. Like secreting and making stomach acid is one of the most metabolically demanding processes in the body
Mm.
that you're hard pressed to gain body fat with that. So that is like something
huh.
I used to use always in the past when I was younger, probably the first 5 or 6 years of coaching, that it does a good trick of like keeping them satiated. Um, they don't get fat, they continue to get leaner. And
Is this in like a contest prep where like hunger is through the roof, so you're like way overeating, or
I
is this
never
like
used it with anything. It really didn't matter. It's just one
oh
of those
okay.
things I'd sprinkle in there.
Was this for
I
just
wouldn't
a
do it with
few days,
females.
like a few days in the week?
Yes, yeah. So I always would do it like maybe it'd be like the way I style train is usually 2 on, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off, one more, and then like off 2 days, whatever 4 day split would be. I would always have them train hard 2 days, have higher carbs, lower carb 1 day, and when usually on the weekend or 1 or 2 days a week, we would throw in that day. And the reason why I like the weekend is usually they're not working. Usually they're with their family. Usually they're getting in scenarios where they're bored and so they're starving. So it's a perfect time to apply that there. It's just cool, like just flood your system full of it. And I know Austin, you've probably done it before. It's been a while since it's been talked about it. Maybe Scott Stevenson talked about it at one point, but I can't remember the guy that gave it to me. It's been years ago. It was back when I was having a lot of like insulin resistance issues. And it done the trick, and it's something I've always used to always do across the board, mainly with men. Females, it doesn't work as well just because they get grossed out with meat and stuff like that. So I haven't had much success with females
I like that, man.
in terms of
That's a
getting them
good
to
trick.
adhere
I've
to it.
never
Yeah,
heard of it.
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was, but there were studies around 2000,
Yeah.
2020, maybe even before that, uh, with protein overfeeding, various different studies, showing the effects of that. And to Trey's point, yeah, there's just really inefficient process to convert it to fat. So theoretically it works, assuming they can digest it.
Right. And that's why you don't do it so
The
much because it
biggest
would wreck
limiter.
their digestion. Like
Well,
Yeah.
if you're going to abuse it.
Milos Sarchev's all about overdoing protein.
Yeah, I can imagine doing that. Now doing it on a daily basis.
No.
Yeah.
Now that's kind of a great thing to throw in here from a fat loss standpoint, or even probably general nutrition standpoint, is especially since I would imagine a lot of people listening probably work with a fair amount of females. Is just the amount of protein I see people use sometimes with
Yeah.
these people is definitely problematic potentially, just because the idea of doing 1 gram per pound for a 180-pound female is like, well,
Yes.
the parallel that I always draw is this: if you took their stature, so take their height, and you compared a competitor, we'll use a bikini competitor because they don't have that much muscle, but they generally probably still have more muscle than your average soccer mom, right? If you
Mhm.
strip that person all the way down,
Right.
what does that 5'5" bikini competitor weigh on stage? Like 105 pounds, 100
Yeah.
pounds?
100-ish. Yeah.
Yeah. So how much lean body mass does that individual really have? Well, I mean, a male bodybuilder probably has single digit body fat left on their body as far as, total body fat. A female is going to be more than that. So what do they have? 85 pounds of lean body mass? 90 pounds? Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. So realistically, 180 grams of protein for somebody that has like maybe 100 pounds of lean body mass is absurd.
Yeah.
Potentially, right? Like it is one of those things at the beginning where when we're going in and like adding some of those like fruits into the diet potentially, right? Or and you maybe drop the protein to a more reasonable amount, that tends to have a pretty nice effect right at the beginning as well. And you're not dropping it too low. And I like Jeff's point about leveraging the fats and transitioning into the carbohydrates a little more later. That's something I like to do a lot as well. With that higher fruit intake and antioxidant intake, you're able to process fats a lot better, right? Because then once the liver's working,
Yeah.
then we have more bile acid, more bile acid secretion, better bile flow.
Right.
They're like, oh my gosh, I can digest fat now. They're not having fat in their stool,
Yep.
so on and so forth. So
It's all omega-3 sources too, just to be clear.
right. So you're able to digest those things a lot better. So you can handle it. And now we have fat to leverage from a hormonal standpoint as well. Assuming that we're intaking pretty good sources of fat. So I like doing something similar to what Jeff said there
Yeah.
also. So I noticed pretty good effects from that. Another thing I wanted to point out, that I think would be helpful for people is just looking at timelines on here. before you might do something like, would you be more of a proponent of doing a refeed or pushing people doing like extended diet breaks?
That's
Because
a good idea. That's a good idea.
because what I tend to notice is for some people the traditional route of just refeeding based on using a cyclical approach, every week, whatever it is, works fine, right? Works fine for them. Maybe it's a free meal, maybe it's just weekend with the family, like whatever it is, works perfectly fine. For other people that are really resistant to fat loss, sometimes for those individuals, even being a little more aggressive for short periods of time and then pulling them out of that entirely
Yeah.
for what we would call a diet break, I would consider a diet break more than a few days, right?
Yes.
So maybe a week, 2 weeks. Um, and it doesn't have to be a large bolus of food. You're bringing them back up to maintenance roughly,
Right.
maybe give or take a little bit. Um, but that's a way for some of those really resistant people, like your PCOS cases and some of the ones that have been very leptin resistant for like really long periods of time, because you're probably not going to run into too many negatives from worrying about hormonal and metabolic adaptation in short windows. So I'm saying short windows, 4 weeks, 6 weeks,
Mhm.
something like that. We can kind of push them a little bit harder, bring them out of it. So we're dropping in chunks over time versus this just linear approach that we might take with a more traditional case.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think, for beginners, people who are just Gen Pop, not competitors, obviously, a weekly free meal or maybe one dirtier free meal, one cleaner free meal might be good and just sustain it like that. Then, I think your standard 3 low, 1 high or 5 low, 2 high fixed transitional, carb cycle would be fine too. And then Austin, as you said, as things get a little more advanced, you might want to sustain the deficit longer, but then diet break for maybe 1 week or 2 weeks or something like that. But that all depends on how advanced the client is. And the only thing that I would add to this portion of our conversation is if you are going to carb cycle, make sure that you're doing it long enough. Or if you're switching fuel sources between fats and carbs, make sure you're doing it long enough. And I would say between 3 to 5 days before switching over and refeeding, because I think the biggest mistake people make is that they go low carb for like 2 days and they refeed hugely, like a huge refeed on like the third day, and it does nothing. You're just
Well, when
pulling
you say
yourself
refeed,
out.
do you mean a high carb day or like a legitimate
Like even a high
refeed?
carb day, or like another mistake people make is like the differences aren't large enough. Like your low carb day is like 180 carbs, and your high carb day is like 200.
Mm,
Like that, like I think it needs to be a large disparity, and the disparity has to be extended long enough. That's just what I see.
hmm
Yeah. And also it depends on how, like, what you're doing with expenditure in there too,
That
with
too,
cardio,
yeah.
Oh
because
yeah, yeah.
for some people they're going to get a lot more benefit from dropping expenditure and dropping fatigue than they are just cramming food in.
That is a really good point. Yep.
They they just you might still refeed them, but maybe it's not a
And it's
huge
not
refeed,
this high.
because that's still adjusting your net total, your net intake, right? Expenditure plus intake gives you your net total. So for some individuals that are high stress or that get fatigued, accumulate a lot of fatigue, they might just need a more moderate refeed or more moderate diet break and just pull some of that activity out for a
Mhm.
couple days or a day or a week, depending on how much fatigue's accumulated. And that's the thing that gets them to drop,
Mhm.
right?
hmm
It's like, we'll half your cardio, or we'll take a day off of cardio entirely, or we'll take 2 days off from cardio, or we'll refeed on a non-training day type of thing, right? Where we're not training and not doing any cardio, you can relax.
Right.
So the fatigue mitigation thing is huge. It's no different than contest prep, right? It's the
Yeah.
same deal. General population, it's all the same adaptations. It's just that you might be looking at more extremes when you're trying to get peeled for a show
Right.
versus somebody that's just trying to not be 40% body fat, but it's still like mechanistically, it's still the same.
That's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the cardio thing is big. I I I'm not a huge fan if someone's doing an hour of cardio a day to never rotate them out of that
Yeah.
as part of that strategy.
Yeah. What do you feel about like steps though? Like, cause like, getting like, let's say a 3 mile walk in takes about an hour for most people. Do you think that's something that you would rotate out, or is that okay to keep in? What do you think?
Well, looking at the intensity of the steps, how much over their normal baseline is that?
Yeah.
I think that matters. I don't think, and I tell them, I don't think steps are inherently stressful in and of themselves at some point, right? At 15,000, 20,000,
Okay.
we're starting to have a different conversation. But if their baseline is 8, 9, 10K and their leg training feels okay and they're not like walking around feeling like they have concrete in their shoes,
Yeah.
it's probably not a huge problem. But I do think that some people that require higher expenditure to lose body fat probably will have to consider rotating things out, or I'll even just have them, if they have a day or two during the week where they're not working, maybe they have a labor job and they like move around a lot or they walk a lot for their job. Maybe on those days we just have 5 days of cardio and then we have 2 days that are lower.
Mhm.
And maybe that on those lower days are their actual rest days. So I'm saying you're doing cardio 5 to 6 days a week, and then you're having a day completely off of training and cardio,
Mhm.
all of it.
Yeah.
Right. So we leave that seventh day is clear, that type of thing.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Just some different strategies potentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
I think that sums it up pretty good. Trey, you got anything
Anything
to
you guys
add?
want to add?
I mean, I do the same thing. I mean, I'm not into the step stuff, but like what I do is you have your steps, that's your step goal, whatever. You keep that consistent. That is not including your cardio, or cardio does not include your steps. That's the big thing I do, at least in the fat loss phases. If it's like lifestyle and they're just trying to clean up body comp, that's fine. But if we're like talking, I want to lose as much body fat as possible, or prep, or photo shoot, or wedding prep, whatever, the two are always going to be separate. And I want that step count to be consistent. And then I do the same thing as like Austin. Um, when they're off of work, I always pull off the weekend of like mechanical cardio and just say, hey, get outside, walk around, stay active, hit your step count. It's going to be easier. They're going to get some of the benefits of being outside and then just rest. That's something I've seen work, especially for like people with like crazy work schedules, or like get very stressed, very inflamed. I've found that to work pretty well. Um, and then with the refeeding stuff, honestly, it really depends. Like I don't really build in anything. I just say, hey, like if it's an important event, you make the decision on what you should do. I'm gonna encourage you, like if you're a like true lifestyle client and it's your anniversary, encourage you to go eat the meal and not worry about it. But then something else that I've had a lot of success with, I'd say in the last year, is implementing like a rigidity break on the weekends where they're just not tracking anything. They're still being mindful of their choices, but they might have some type of untracked meal at night, but or maybe Saturday and Sunday, maybe one's dirtier, one's cleaner, insert X term. But it's kind of giving them a mental break, and then if I do implement those refeeds, I'm not doing it so much on like the carbs or the calories. I've been based on the person. And this is something I started doing years ago, was like I remember I'd have guys where the refeeds like on paper it should work and it wasn't working. And so what I'd do, I'd be like, okay, we're gonna do a burger and fry, or we're gonna do what is your food you enjoy. I would implement that, and it might be less carbs or less calories or whatever. It worked so much better because mentally they were unplugging. Mentally, they were getting that dopamine response. They were feeling better, and it worked that much better than like the 1 to 2 or 3 day refeeds or diet breaks. Is it was more of a mental thing than anything, and that's something still I'll implement with certain individuals if I detect there's more of a mental aspect to them, even though on paper, if we're talking about refeeding or maybe helping with fat loss or anything like that, on paper, it seems to be like going higher carb, a little bit lower fat, and just bumping the carbs should be enough to bring down cortisol, help the thyroid, help the metabolism. But from an experience standpoint, I have seen that implementing that untracked meal and we would build it up worked well. And I remember I had one guy, we would just add to it each week. And it was almost like a modified like skip day, or I don't even think people do that anymore. Most people listen probably haven't even heard of that. But
Skip does.
yeah, skip does. So those are just a few different ways I've implemented things and seen it work. So it's really been specific to the individual there. And anyone listening, just try different things, see what works for you. If you're someone that maybe mentally it'd benefit you to have like a burger and fry, but you also know that's going to trigger cravings, trigger binging, probably best to avoid that. Maybe you need to look at other strategies or see how can you make that a healthier option. If you know you're someone that gets burned out easier and you know it's going to impact your day-to-day living and you kind of in a negative lull, then maybe the refeed of like a 2 to 3 day refeed isn't going to work. Maybe you opt for something like a burger and fry or like a modified like skip load or something like that. Or then again, if you're that person that gets burnt out in general of dieting, maybe that rigidity break would do a little bit better, or cycling off that cardio and just getting more active outside with like your kids, your partner, things like that. Those are a few different ways you could cycle things and keep progressing that fat loss.
Really
When you
good.
say going outside, you're not talking walking up a 9% grade up
No,
the side of a
it's
mountain for 10 miles for their
most of the people,
relaxation.
yeah, most of these people I get that want to lose body fat, they have kids. Um, and I try to encourage them to like, you got to get out there and play with your kids. No day is guaranteed. So it might be like maybe they're playing soccer with the kids or throwing the football or playing football. Like, just get out there. You don't need to go out there and do a 30-mile hike or I
Probably
ruck
shouldn't.
for 50 miles. You know what I mean? Like they don't need to do something like that, but get outside, get into nature. You're gonna get all the benefits there in the first place. So
I love
Cool,
walking
cool.
outside. One of my favorite things to do.
Yeah. Well, it's nice right now. So in the winter, man, got to go out, got to bundle up.
Yeah, I mean, I still go out like in the winter. I just dress for it. I'm
Yeah.
in like 4 different layers, got gloves, hat, and everything. So
I stop in the winter. I
yeah, I know
don't.
you don't like it.
No, no.
Eric's
I
like,
do
ah,
5 miles every day. That's my 10,000 steps. Otherwise, like I tried. There were some days where I just wouldn't walk and I just do my own thing. And there are some days I would get less than 1,000 steps. Like I'm that sedentary without that.
Mm.
yep.
So I need to walk 5 miles every day.
cool guys. Awesome. I think
Cool.
those
That's
were some great takeaways for sure.
Yeah, good
yeah.
talk.
All right. Anything else going on that we want to put out there or
Workshops.
Uh,
oh
yeah,
yeah, workshop the 29th
workshops.
of
We
June.
have ours next week.
Huh?
Ours is next week.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you guys, IMH workshop, right?
Yep, next Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern. You can check out my page. We have up in my bio, we've got a link to that. So submission form, all that jazz.
Yeah.
So it'll be myself, Trey will be there, Aaron and Matt from IMH as well. So definitely encourage you to check that out. And then of course, Jeff's first call out workshop at the end of June.
Yep, June 29th, 5 to 7. All of us will be there.
Yep.
Well, so
Cool. All
yep.
right, guys. Awesome.
All right.